What we're going to introduce right now is the notion of positioning, and this is actually a pretty tricky topic. I'm going to go over some basics, and we're really going to have to talk about this more because how to position things to show up exactly the way you want and to also reposition when the screen changes is something that we have to develop a skill around. But we want to go over some basic principles real quick. So let me just go here and let's review the lesson. For elements in a HTML page, there are 4 different types of positionings. There's static, and that is where we start. Every item defaults to static, and that just basically means where it is in the code is where it's going to show up in the page, depending on whether it's like we talked about yesterday, whether it's a display block or whether it's a display inline, lets us know whether it gets its own line or not. For instance, an H1 is a display block, so if I put a bunch of H1s together, they're going to show up like this, right? This one, then this one, then this one, then this one. The next item is fixed, which we did earlier, if you remember, with the Gettysburg Address, where we had Abraham Lincoln's picture fixed up here. And that just means that you say exactly where it's going to go, and it's not going to change based on when we start to scroll. The image is going to stay there. What's important to know is that a fixed element can overlap. As we saw with other elements, we saw that the image here overlapped with the text, if you remember that. And that becomes important because there are going to be times where you want different images to overlap each other, one to be behind, one to be in front of the other. And that's something that we're going to talk about with regards to the other 2 elements, relative and absolute. As we said, that every item on a page has a natural position where it's supposed to be, its normal position based on where it is in the code. A relative position element means that you take where it was supposed to be and you move it over. You can move it up, you can move it to the right, you can move it down, you can move it to the left, but its position is still there. So things will move around it. There might be blank space where it was, rather than just moving it over and ignoring the space there. And again, this is, even as I'm explaining it, it gets a little tricky. So we're just going to experiment with it, and then we're going to use it more and more as we move forward with some design techniques. And then absolute position is something where, rather than positioning it relative to where it was or where it's supposed to be, you're positioning your element relative to something else. For instance, let's say that you're positioning an element relative to the top of the page. Well, if you bring it down 50 pixels and move it over 50 pixels, you're going to put it there. It doesn't matter where it is in the code. It doesn't matter where it's supposed to be. You put it wherever you want. And the key thing to remember about that is that when you make something an absolute image, the other elements ignore it. So they go around it as if it isn't there. And that's, again, if you want to try to overlap, or if you want to accomplish some sort of stylistic device, you can do that. But the key thing to remember, I just want us to be familiar with these topics. We really do have to play around with them in order to get them in a real way so that you can use them for design. But I just want to introduce them here today because they are pretty complicated. So let's go over here into our edit section, and let's look at our list about how things work normally. So here's an H1. Here's an H, actually these are all H1s. H1, image, H1, H1, H1. So what we're going to do is, let's say that we want to we'll leave our H1 normally, and let's say that we want to do something with our image. So we're going to say that our image is going to be absolutely positioned. So position, excuse me, absolute, and we're going to make it, let's say we're going to make it from the top, we'll bring it 10 pixels down from the top, and we'll do it 10 pixels over from the left, okay? So not much positioning, just a little bit. Okay, and so you can see there that what I've done is, because it's absolute, everything else ignores it. So it just shows up on the page, everything else ignores it. And that's good. Now what you can see here is that this is showing up over the text here. And I don't want it to show up over the text. And what I can do, remember how I said certain things could overlap? Well, if they do overlap, so if you use a position of absolute or a position of fixed, you can specify what's the preference, what should show up on top, what should show up next, what should show. Let's say you had 4 images that you were overlapping for some reason to create some sort of effect. Well, you have to specify which one is going to be which. So you do what's called a z-index, and a z-index lets you specify whether this is going to be on the top or bottom. And the way you do that is the highest number is on the top. And so what we're going to do is -1, and that will mean that this shifts down to the bottom of whatever things are competing for that same space. So if I click Save Work and Show Web Page, you can see now it goes, the image is now underneath the text. All right, so let's say that we want to take a look at some other things. So let's create a class, Position Top. And here, I want this to be a position relative. Okay, so now do we remember what position relative means? It means where is it already in the page? Now I want to move from that space. So I want to do position relative, and I want to do position relative. And remember, the image I think for this particular one that was called position top was right about here. So I want to go up. Now remember, I'm not doing it from the top. I'm doing it from my relative position. So I want to go -20 pixels from where it was. And let's just change that so it's a little bit easier. So this is position top. Okay. So ordinarily, this would flow right after the normal flow header, right? So I'm name correct. We're going to call that position top, and we're going to save it. So you can see I've now taken it, and it's a little confusing. Let me go back down. I'm going to make this moving up 40 pixels, because it's going to move up just below. I think based on that, it's going to move up just below, then this is the normal flow header. So let's click Save and Show Web Page. So you can see here that I moved it up. It was supposed to be here, and I moved it up 40 pixels to here. But that space is still there. Okay, so it's just basically moving it. It's putting it in a position relative to its original position. So now let's take a look at the header goes left and the header goes right. So we're going to do position left, and we'll say we're going to go left. Let's just go left 10 pixels. We'll be able to see, and that's going to be left -10 pixels. So this one here, position left, should go left 10 pixels. You can see it might have done that a little bit. Pixels. So we'll be able to see, oh, and we need to specify, because remember, its default position is static. And if we do a static position, none of these, unless we specify relative, none of these directions mean anything. All right, so we'll do left 20 pixels, Save Work and Show Web Page, and you can see that it's moved over to the left. And then let's take a look here, and we'll do position right. And again, this is a relative position. And right, and we'll do this 100 pixels to the right so we can see that. All right, look what I did. I made a mistake. Let's change that to position equals relative. Make sure we can see that. Position equals relative. Save Work and Show Web Page. I went the wrong way. I went from the left. I went 100 pixels from the right. What I want to do is I want to do, if I'm going towards the left, towards the right, then I want to go from the left. So I'm going to do, let's do 200 pixels. Sorry. Now let's take a look at position right. And what we're doing here is we're still going from the left, but we're deciding on the left side how many, from the from the position, how many pixels do we want to move over to the right? So let's say that we want to go 200 pixels to the, it's to the right because it's from the left part of the element. So you can see here that I've moved from here, which is the left, I've moved 200 pixels this way. All right, so you can see that I'm able to, with this type of positioning, I'm able to move things around and put elements where I want them to, including overlapping and different things. And we're going to get into some fun stuff around overlapping in a couple of lessons. But I wanted to introduce these concepts of positioning to you. And so what you're going to want to do is basically, I'm going to give you this assignment, and you can recreate this assignment, putting things where you want them to go on your page.